Mr. Connolly was here, and I'm always frightened when I agree with him, but I agree with him more and more when we do these oversight hearings. I want to focus a little bit on how we got here. And I heard the ranking member talk about the draconian budget cuts. Mr. Mulholland, I heard you mention draconian budget cuts. And certainly at the IRS, I apologize, I don't have the HHS numbers or DOD, so I don't appear to want to be picking on the IRS, but it's the numbers I could get in the last 5 minutes. And certainly your budget has been cut in the last couple of years. 3% this year was up 0.8% the year before that, down 5% the year before that, down 2.5% the year before that. But I think we'd all agree that this is, when you're still using technology and computer systems from the 70s and the 80s, this is not a problem that started in 2012. Okay? And I see that Mr. Mulholland is nodding his head. I go back to 2000, Mr. Mulholland, when the Republicans were in charge, actually, and your budget went up almost 6%. The next year, 8.5%. The next year, almost 4%. Then 4%. 4% after that. And the Democrats take over in 2007. Your budget is up 4.7%, 3.8%, 5.4%. How can you really sit there and tell us this is money? I mean, you got bigger increases than everybody else in the country in 2008. I can assure you there were private industries and businesses and households that didn't see a 5.4% increase in their budgets during the recession. I mean, how can you sit there with a straight face and say it's money? Because while that's convenient today and ties into what the ranking member was saying, haven't you been mismanaging the money since the 1970s and 1980s? Isn't that the only way you end up in this problem?
I think there is a different way to characterize it than management. I can't speak for my predecessors at all, but decisions made back in the 70s and continued into the 80s and 90s and the first decade of this century basically said, let's build a set of systems that automate the paper processing set of systems. So the way taxes were handled in the 40s and 50s and 60s became automated in the way that computer systems were designed. That means that when you file your taxes even electronically today, they're actually batched up electronically in a set of files that then need to be passed from system to system. And there are lots and lots of interconnections that make that possible. The program was written in assembly language, and by the way, it's written very elegantly. It is incredibly well engineered for the time it was designed and built. The underlying infrastructure is very much state-of-the-art. That's why we can process returns so fast. But we're constrained by those past decisions and the ability to share that data with, I'll just say, new programs that we want to provide.
Does anybody,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Does anybody that you know of, does anybody on the whole panel, does anybody in the private sector do it the way the government does it? Are there any private companies out there using 8-inch floppy disks and expired languages and machines they can't get pieces for? Is there anybody out there who does this?
There are certainly companies that use old programming languages, like assembly language and COBOL and Fortran and others. Most are converting themselves, like we are, to a modern programming language. All new development, beginning with Java, for example, or other modern programming languages, they use modern development techniques so that you start with building a data model for your enterprise rather than have it as an afterthought with security built in. I think the current practices, we would not have done it that way if we had the knowledge we have today.
Mr. Mulholland, you mentioned something about your predecessor, and someone mentioned something in the previous testimony. How long have you been in this position at the IRS?
I've been here not quite 8 years.
Gotcha. What is the average tenure, and this is maybe to the OMB, the GAO, what's the average tenure of a CIO at our major agencies?
2 years.
Is that a problem?
It's a huge problem.
Why?
Well, in regards to legacy systems, what CIO wants to come in over a 2-year period and undertake one of these massive conversion efforts? They pick the low-hanging fruit and get quick wins, and they don't tackle the difficult stuff often enough.
Who controls the tenure of a CIO at a major agency or department? Is it Congress? Anybody?
Well, it depends.
Who
Some are
decides?
Senate confirmed. Most are appointed politically.
Right, but if we're going to say that Mr. Halverson's going to be CIO at DOD and we're going to leave him there 2 years, whose call is that? Is it ours or is it somebody else's?
Depending on when the 2 years start, it would generally be the Secretary of Defense's call, but if I am politically appointed, so I will
Yeah.
change out with the administration.
Gotcha. It's an executive decision, right? It was sort of a rhetorical question. Yeah, Congress doesn't say that you have a 2-year term at DOD or a 2-year term at HHS or at any agency. It's an executive decision under both administrations, because Mr. Powner, I take it your data goes back to Republican administrations as well.
Yeah, it goes back a long ways. We've done multiple studies dating back for years on this.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.